Welcome back to True Crime with Christina. Before we start, I need to give you a serious content warning. This episode contains graphic descriptions of extreme violence, a brutal murder, and disturbing details that are not suitable for sensitive listeners. Please listen with care. Tonight, we are diving into the shocking murder of Sharon Gregory, a bright, curious young woman with her whole life ahead of her. We'll explore the twisted mind of the killer, Mark Branch, a man who became so obsessed with horror movies that he brought his violent fantasies to life. This is a story about a small town shattered by fear, a family torn apart, and a killer whose obsession turned deadly. Let's get into it. So, who was Sharon Gregory? Well, she was born on March 26, 1970. She was an 18-year-old young woman with a big heart and a curious mind. She was studying psychology at Greenfield Community College because she wanted to understand why people do what they do. She loved learning about human behavior, everything from what makes people happy, what makes people sad, and how life shapes who they become. People said she was the kind of person who listened with care, someone who made you feel safe when you talked to her. She had a twin sister named Cheryl, and they were very close. More than just sisters, they were best friends. They shared everything: secrets, stories, and dreams for the future. From a young age, Sharon was always thinking about people. She liked to watch and listen, trying to figure out why people acted the way they did. Her teachers said that she was a wise and thoughtful individual, and she had a gift for understanding others. Sharon dreamed of helping people one day, maybe as a therapist or counselor. She wanted to make the world a little better by helping others with their pain. For one of her psychology projects, Sharon decided to write a profile about someone who seemed really interesting: Mark Branch. Mark was a strange guy in town. He liked horror movies, and some people thought he acted in a weird way. Sharon thought it would be a good idea to study him for schoolwork. She wasn't trying to be mean or hurt him. She just wanted to understand why someone would be so drawn to scary things. I don't know for sure if Sharon finished her paper or showed it to the teacher. It might have just been something she was working on quietly. But somehow, Mark Branch found out about it, and when he did, he wasn't happy. For Mark, the idea that someone was studying him felt like an attack. He felt embarrassed, like Sharon was trying to expose him or something. What Sharon saw as a school project, Mark saw as a personal insult, and that's when things started to go wrong. Sharon had no idea how dangerous it would be to write about Mark. She was a kind, thoughtful person who wanted to understand the world. She never meant to hurt anyone, but her curiosity and her deep interest in psychology would end in tragedy. Greenfield, Massachusetts was a small, peaceful town in 1988. It was the kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where the streets were quiet, and where life felt safe. Families would leave their doors unlocked, and kids could ride their bikes down the street without worry. It was a close knit community, and nothing really bad ever seemed to happen there. But in 1988, something happened that would change Greenfield forever. Who was Mark Branch? Well, in 1988, he was a 19-year-old young man living in Greenfield. He had a hard life growing up. His childhood wasn't easy, and he struggled with a lot of emotional problems. People who knew Mark said he was quiet and kept to himself. He didn't really have friends. He mostly stayed in his own world, and people often thought he was strange. Mark had one big obsession: horror movies. He was completely hooked, especially on the Friday the 13th series. He would rent those movies over and over again from the local video store. He just didn't watch them, he studied them. He loved the blood, the violence, the killers, the weapons. He would collect things like masks, toy weapons, and pictures of horror characters like Jason Voorhees, the famous mask killer from Friday the 13th. Mark's bedroom showed just how deep this obsession was. The walls were covered in posters of horror films. He had magazines about killers and horror movies stacked up everywhere. He even had a collection of knives and Jason Voorhees masks. Mark worked at a local grocery store, bagging groceries and helping customers. Sometimes he also worked at the video rental store, probably so he could be close to the movies he loved. One of his co-workers remembered how Mark would always rent the goriest, bloodiest films. That was his thing. He wasn't interested in comedies or dramas, only horror. Mark wasn't just a horror fan. It seemed like those movies were his whole world. But nobody knew back then just how dangerous his obsession would become. On October 24th, 1988, around noon, Mark Branch went to Sharon Gregory's house. But he wasn't just dressed like himself that day. He came looking like a killer. He wore a hockey mask, just like Jason from Friday the 13th, and heavy black boots that tuttered against the floor with each step. It was as if Mark had become the character he loved so much. The mask hiding his face, the boots making him feel like a monster. Sharon was home alone. She had no idea what was about to happen. Mark forced his way inside, and Sharon tried to escape. She ran up the stairs, desperate to get away, her heart racing in panic, but Mark chased after her. Step by step, he got closer, his boots pounding behind her. Sharon tried to hide in the bathroom, slamming the door shut, but it wasn't enough. Mark broke in, and that's when the horror began. He attacked her with a knife in a savage, brutal way. He stabbed her over and over again, deep, forceful wounds to her head, her chest, and stomach. It wasn't just one or two times. He stabbed her so many times that her body was torn apart. Her throat was also slashed. The cut was so deep it nearly severed her windpipe. The blood splattered everywhere on the walls, the floor, the sink. The white tiles were soaked in red. Sharon must have fought back, but Mark did not stop. The attack was merciless, and the bathroom became a scene of total chaos. Later that day, Cheryl, Sharon's twin sister, came home. She opened the door, expecting to find her sister maybe studying or relaxing. Instead, she walked into a nightmare. She found Sharon's body on the bathroom floor. Her twin sister, the person she loved most in the whole world, was lying in a pool of blood, lifeless. At first, Cheryl could barely breathe. Her heart dropped, and then she froze in shock. Not too long after, she started screaming. She called the cops right away. When the officers arrived, she told them everything about Mark, about how her sister was writing a psychological profile about him. Sharon's body was a horrifying sight. The coroner's report later said that the wounds were so deep and brutal that it showed that Mark had acted with pure rage. Sharon was only 18 years old, a bright, curious girl who just wanted to understand the human mind. And because of that, she died. After finding Sharon's body, the police had no doubt who they were looking for: Mark Branch. As you already know, Sharon's sister had told them everything about the psychological profile, about Mark's obsession with the horror movies, and the evidence pointed straight at him. When police went to Mark's house, they found it empty. His mother said that he left earlier that day, but she didn't know where he went. It was like he had disappeared. Inside Mark's bedroom, the police found a chilling scene. His room looked like a shrine to horror and death. The walls were covered with movie posters of Jason from Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, and all the monsters of the horror movie in the world staring back at them. Stacks of magazines about serial killers lay in piles. Knives were scattered everywhere in the bedroom, some with jagged edges that looked like they could tear skin apart. And of course, there were the masks of Jason. At least three of them sitting on a shelf like trophies, staring blankly through black holes where the eyes should be. It was clear that Mark had been living in the dark, violent world of fantasy and obsession. The next day, police found Mark's car abandoned in the woods, about 13 miles away near Buckland. It was parked off a dirt road, hidden amongst the trees. When they opened the door, they found blood smeared on the front seat and the console, dark sticky stain that hinted at what Mark had done. It was like the car itself had become part of the crime scene. That discovery set off a massive manhunt. Police officers, dogs, helicopters, all searching in the woods, combined through the thick trees, calling out Mark's name. But it was like he had vanished into the shadows. And while they searched, fear gripped the town. Greenfield wasn't the same quiet town anymore. People were terrified that Mark would come back and kill again, maybe even on Halloween, dressed as Jason. Parents canceled Halloween, afraid to let their kids go out after the dark. The town's big Halloween parade was called off. Even the local movies theater postponed the release of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Nobody wanted to see an horror movie when there was a real life killer out there lurking in the dark, like Michael Myers. Greenfield was living in fear. No one knew where Mark was, but everyone felt like he could be anywhere, hiding in the woods, waiting for his next victim around a car. It took over a month, but finally, on November 28, 1988, a hunter in Buckland made a discovery that shocked everyone. The hunter was walking through the woods, about a mile from where Mark's car had been found. As he moved through the trees, he noticed something strange hanging in the distance. At first, he thought it might be a broken branch or a old bag tangled in the tree. But as he got closer, the horrifying truth became clear. It was a body. The body was hanging from a tree, suspended by a belt and shoelaces. The sight was gruesome. Mark's body had been out there for weeks, exposed to the elements. It was decomposing badly, and the smell of death filled the air. Animals and insects had already started to disturb the body, leaving marks that made it even harder to recognize him. His clothes were dirty and torn, and the body swayed slightly in the cold November wind, like a broken puppet. The medical examiner was called in, and the scene was treated carefully. After examining the body, the examiner believed it was a suicide and that Mark died not too long after Sharon's murder. His body had been hanging there for weeks, hidden by the trees, slowly decaying in the quiet woods. But not everyone believed it was a suicide. Some people in Greenfield whispered that Mark had been hunted down by some people who had taken justice into their own hands. They thought someone might have killed Mark and hung his body in the woods, making it look like a suicide. After all, the murder of Sharon had shaken the whole town, and there were people really, really pissed off about it. But no evidence was ever found to prove that. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just Mark's body hanging in the cold, in silent woods, as if the forest itself had swallowed him whole. And so the story of Mark Branch came to a dark, haunted end. After the horror that happened in Greenfield, people were left with so many questions. How could this have happened? How could a young man like Mark Branch, who grew up in the same small town as everyone else, turn into a real life killer? Some people in Greenfield blamed the horror movies. They said that watching so many violent films, like Friday the 13th, had twisted Mark's mind. They believed he couldn't tell the difference between fantasy and reality anymore, that the blood and violence on the screen had somehow leaked into his real world. Others thought that there was more to the story, that Mark had been struggling for a long time with mental health issues, and that nobody had really helped him. Maybe if he had gotten the support he needed, this tragedy could have been prevented. And then there was Sharon's profile, the psychological report she had written about Mark. It was never found. It's possible that Mark destroyed it, maybe to hide what she had written, or maybe because he did not want anyone else to see it. That profile could have held clues about what was going on inside of his mind, but now we'll never know. What happened in Greenfield became a chilling reminder of how important mental health is. It showed how a person's pain, if ignored or misunderstood, can spiral into something dangerous. And unfortunately, it left a small, peaceful town forever changed, haunted by the memory of an innocent young woman that was full of promise and a young man who let darkness take over his life. Thank you for joining me on this dark and chilling story. Until the next episode, be smart, be safe, and always keep an eye open.